Welcome to week 8 of your health policy class. This week we will be discussing patient safety and quality issues in healthcare. The video that introduced our topic this week mentioned two things that frequently come up as patient safety issues in healthcare settings. The first is mistakes that are made with medication errors. The second identified were infections that people get in healthcare settings that were not present on admission but developed during a hospitalization that are widely considered to be preventable. The second reading that goes along with today's lecture included slides from the Joint Commission. Tracing back to 1917, the initial standards that were put in place for hospital patient safety were developed by the American College of Surgeons. Throughout the years, the standards for patient safety were changed, and the current version today is defined as the conditions of participation, or COPs. The COPs include all requirements for facilities who participate in either the federal Medicare or Medicaid programs. The conditions of participation are regulations that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services administers. Those conditions of participation regulations are not necessarily updated on an annual basis. They are updated as CMS sees it necessary. But the regulations are a very different process than what's included for states to maintain auditing against those standards. Those are a protocol defined in the State Operations Manual. A copy of the Appendix A, or the survey protocol that surveyors need to use to audit hospital standards, is included on this slide. It is a long, lengthy document and is referred to as interpretive guidance for surveyors to use when they audit healthcare facilities. You may recall that the Joint Commission slides mentioned the process of accreditation. Once the Joint Commission was formed, they were an entity that was eligible for quote-unquote deeming healthcare facilities as being compliant with the conditions of participation. The Joint Commission serves as an external third party, not a state or federally sponsored entity, that deems and accredits a variety of different healthcare providers. As was mentioned in the previous slide with the State Operations Manual, there are a set of significant regulations associated with different conditions of participations for different provider types. On this slide is an example for some requirements that a hospital must provide 24-hour nursing services that are furnished by a supervisory position of someone who holds a registered nurse's degree or has a licensed practical nurse on duty at all times, except in specific instances where rural hospitals have a 24-hour nursing waiver that has been granted. Below this particular regulation is the corresponding interpretive guidance, which is meant to serve as guidance to a state surveyor or a Joint Commission surveyor in how they need to interpret this regulation. In this instance, the interpretive guidance asks the hospital to provide nursing services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and make sure that it's audited that that is actually the standard in place for this particular facility. Though a necessary part of the process in having minimum standards that facilities must meet to provide care under the Medicare and Medicaid entitlement programs, there is a significant cost associated with complying with those requirements. This graphic was taken out of your reading today, produced by the American Hospital Association. This looks at the number of FTEs that a hospital is required to have in place to make sure they can meet the minimum standards of the conditions of participation. As you can see from this graphic, it has an average of approximately 23 different full-time employees per facility in order to manage the process associated with maintaining the conditions of participation. One of the things you should have gotten out of the readings, especially with the Joint Commission slides, are that different settings of care have different standards. The Joint Commission slides included standards for hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, home health agencies, ambulatory surgical centers, end-stage renal disease providers, but there was at least one category of providers that was not included and does not have a minimum standard set of conditions of participation for the Medicare program. Do you recall what set of providers that is? You may have concluded that it is physicians and physician offices as a setting of care that does not have its own set of conditions of participation. Please take some time to go into D2L and opine on this discrepancy and potential inequity in the conditions of participation for Medicare and Medicaid and what it means for all providers. Also, feel free to make any comments about any of the slides in part 1 of this module.